Good morning in Washington, and good afternoon and good evening across Europe. I'm Paula Dobriansky. I'm Vice Chair of the Skokov Center for Strategy and Security at the Atlantic Council, and I also serve on the Atlantic Council's Board of Directors Executive Committee. Welcome to our newest edition of the Atlantic Council's Front Page, our live ideas platform spotlighting global leaders who are innovating and championing constructive solutions to current global challenges. Today, I am very honored to welcome Lithuanian Prime Minister Ingrida Šimonytė. Lithuania is on the front lines of democracy in Europe and has proven to be a key power, both rallying global support for Ukraine in the face of Russia's war to wipe out Ukrainian independence and identity, and also as a bastion of democracy for Belarusians following Alexander Lukashenko's violent suppression of democratic activists. We are hosting Prime Minister Šimonytė following over 100 days of full-scale war in Ukraine, which put into question Europe's security architecture, but also fueled a resurgence of NATO unity. With over 40,000 troops under direct NATO command, mainly in the Baltics, Lithuania plays a crucial role in showcasing Europe's defensive and deterrence capabilities. From being one of the most welcoming voices for Finland and Sweden's NATO membership application to purchasing reconnaissance drones and sending them to Ukraine, Lithuania is one of the strongest supporters of European unity and security. However, Lithuania's foreign policy is about more than just security. It also leads the world when it comes to implementing a values-based foreign policy. As Beijing and Moscow continue to move forward with their no limits partnership announced earlier this year, Lithuania has made headlines around the world as it faces increasing Chinese economic and political pressure because of its deepening relations with Taiwan, including its willingness to let Taipei open a Taiwanese representative office in Vilnius. Lithuania's resilience in the face of this pressure from Beijing could serve as a model for combining economic security with a values-based foreign policy for like-minded countries in Europe and beyond. It is important to hold true to your values, especially when things get difficult. Lithuania, along with the rest of Europe, are facing increasing costs of living and energy prices. But the Prime Minister herself reminded us last week that there is no easier solution when it comes to dealing with Vladimir Putin and his pressure tactics. And as Prime Minister Šimonytė said in response to calls for offering Vladimir Putin certain concessions so that he is not humiliated, this is what she said. She said, quote, "There is no sense of speaking about the dignity of people who are humiliating the dignity of the Ukrainian nation every day," unquote. Well, none of these actions are without consequence, but Lithuania is willing to accept the retribution if it means standing for what is right. Just last week, a draft bill was introduced in the Russian State Duma proposing the revocation of a resolution that recognized Lithuania's independence from the Soviet Union. While the practical implications of such a resolution have yet to be discovered, it shows that the Kremlin views Lithuania's leadership on Ukraine as a threat to its interests. Like Lithuania, the Atlantic Council has been a leader in the conversation about and with Ukraine. Since 2014, we are proud to have been a clear and consistent voice, routinely reminding the world that Moscow began this conflict not just this year, but that it has been threatening peace and security in Europe for over a decade. The Eurasia Center has hosted various members of President Zelensky's team, including President Zelensky himself, his chief of staff, Andrei Yermak, Foreign Minister Kuleba, and the leader of the democratic opposition in Belarus as part of our efforts to highlight the ongoing threats to democracy in Eastern Europe. Now, let me say a few words of, if I may, of introduction about our distinguished guest and our moderator today. Prime Minister Šimonytė assumed office in November of 2020, becoming the second woman in the nation's history to serve in that position. She previously served as the Minister of Finance, and while in Parliament, served on the European Affairs Committee and was the chairperson of the Audit Committee. And we are very pleased today to have Dr. Evelyn Farkas as moderator. Dr. Evelyn Farkas is the executive director of Arizona State University's McCain Institute. She formerly served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, Eurasia, Balkans, and the Caucasus, and also conventional arms control. It's quite a portfolio. And as a senior advisor to the Supreme Allied Commander Europe. Now, before I turn it over, let me just have a few words that we are going to be taking your questions, and we look forward to them. Please submit the questions in Zoom using the Q&A tool found at the bottom of your screen. You can also follow us on Twitter by using the @AC front page. As always, the following discussion is on the record, and you will be able to access this recording at any time on our YouTube channel and our website. So now let me turn it over to Dr. Evelyn Farkas and to begin our discussion. Thank you for your moderation, and thanks again to the Prime Minister for being here today. We're very honored. Over to you, Evelyn.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Dobriansky, and thank you really to the Atlantic Council leadership for bringing someone like Prime Minister Šimonytė to us here in America and around the world through the internet. The Prime Minister, as you mentioned, Ambassador Dobriansky, is innovative, but she's also courageous and really a role model for leaders around the world. So I would like to, Madam Prime Minister, mine your expertise and your courage and ask you a little bit about how you explain to a foreign audience in particular, how a small country like Lithuania decides to stand up to Russia and Vladimir Putin, China and President Xi, and of course your neighbor, the Belarusian Prime Minister, President Lukashenko. That is a decision that you have taken, that your nation has embraced and followed, but it is one that I would imagine you made very much calculating the risks and what was at stake in terms of the outcomes for Lithuania and for the world. So if you could speak a little bit about what is the logic, the rationale, the strategy behind your foreign policy towards those three large autocratic countries.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. And I'm sorry for my voice that might come down, unfortunately, due to unexpected COVID that I thought most of us forgot after 24th of February. So I was not able to come to Washington as was planned initially, but I'm glad that I can have this meeting on internet and still answer some of your questions. So first and foremost, what I want to start with is that we should not sort of use the same logic when we speak about Russia, Belarus, and China, although it comes to some similarity at some point. But I think we should start from Fukuyama, most probably, and the belief that at some point, this end of the world, basically any country can be traded into democracy by globalization, increasing welfare, and strengthening of economic ties, cultural ties, and scientific ties, whatever ties there exist. So, And I know that there was very much of this belief, especially in 1990s in the Western part of the globe. And basically we are a very good example of this is actually happening, because we regained our independence, we restored our links that were destroyed by Soviet occupation. And I think that the progress that my country made from 1990, when the independence was restored, up today is enormous. And this is due to this globalization and integration into the wider context. But it is not the case, unfortunately. This is not a universal rule. And for us, I must say that there most probably are two things that differs us from some of our counterparts. First and foremost, this is geographical proximity that sort of makes our ear a little bit sharp to what is happening further east to us, and sort of make us actually listen to what is being said compared to what is being done, and then draw the conclusions. And the second thing is the practical experience that we've achieved through our history of independence. We've seen so many times of economy actually becoming geopolitics, especially when it comes to, for example, energy resources, but also to other spheres like food export or transportation permits, or something that, you know, that connects us to the Eastern markets, that we lost our belief in Russia actually willing to become a part of this global economy in good faith for quite some time. And we were trying also to warn our good friends and partners, saying that increase of the interconnectedness can actually backfire if we are not smart enough to think about alternatives. And this is actually what happened in the case of gas supplies in fall 2021. But for us, that happened many times before. There was a pipeline, it still existed, it's called Druzhba, so it's the friendship, if you translate that from Russian, that was delivering the oil to our oil refinery company that is quite a big one and quite important for our economy, that just broke apart, technically broke apart in 2006. And then it was just sort of technical, you know, but it was never technical because it's never repaired. It's still not repaired. And we see those pipelines breaking apart on all the fronts across the western border of Russia. So I think this is, you know, at some point it became very visible that actually Russia is not thinking about becoming part of the global geopolitical infrastructure, if one may call it this way, in good faith. And same can be actually said about China, because what is important and what is similar in those respects is that those countries, those regimes are actually using, and I would say abusing, the rules-based world that we live in. The fact that property rights are being protected, freedom of speech, human rights, and whatever is so important to us. So they are using this in our territory, sometimes abusing those concepts of liberal democracy against ourselves. So, and that's why I think we should we should have done that before. I mean, we should have seen that. Some of the countries were thinking that still maybe in good faith of this, you know, Fukuyamish transition happening at some point, but it never did, and I don't think that we should have any hope in this.
Well, thank you for that answer, Madam Prime Minister. And sadly, I have to say, personally, I agree with you. I did serve in the Obama administration from 2012 to 2015, end of October. We probably should have done a better job protecting ourselves, hedging on energy and many other issues, really from 2008 and arguably even before that. And your country, among many others, and in particular the Baltic states, was warning us, and we didn't listen with sufficient sense of urgency. So I would agree with that. I want to narrow in now on Ukraine, because for many of our viewers, that's what they're seeing on television. That's what they're hearing coming out of our politicians' speeches, how we are supporting Ukraine. But at the same time, we hear voices of support, but we also hear, as Ambassador Dobriansky mentioned in introducing you, we also hear sometimes foreign leaders and others talk about some kind of compromise. And so I would be interested in your thoughts on, and we even have a question in the chat, frankly, on this, what is an acceptable outcome from your perspective to the continued war of aggression that Russia is waging against Ukraine? Is it defeat on the battlefield in Donbass, pushing Russia out, or is there some other solution, some other compromise that you would counsel your other colleagues, heads of states, to accept in the current situation?
Well, I think what is important, there are two things that are important. One thing is important, that the outcome or the solution or agreement or whatever you might call it is an outcome that is acceptable to Ukraine itself, and not because it is put in a position where it has no good choices, but because it is an acceptable outcome. Because of course you can push a country into a situation where it is a dead end, and then the country will just succumb. But the second thing that is equally important is the fact that if you let Ukraine succumb, then it means that this is just a break or some pause, and actually an encouragement to Putin, an encouragement that happened in 2014, as a matter of fact. Because yes, there were some sanctions, they were not serious. Yes, this time the reaction is absolutely different. And that, I think, came as a big surprise to Putin. He was not definitely calculating this into his rationale, because however rational people would think he is, he has a very clear sort of ground on which his reasoning stands. And one of the main pillars was that the Western countries would not be able to unite, not speaking about the weapon delivery to Ukraine, and not speaking about, getting on the same page in terms of sanctions, and quite harsh sanctions in a very short time period. So this is what sort of struck him. But now he sees quite good options for maneuver and for sort of pushing Western countries towards some unpleasant situation, because we all know the issue with the grain that is blocked effectively in Ukraine, and the implications that might have on African countries or Middle East countries and global food prices. And of course, this is a challenge on global leaders, and also some of our, or most of ours in Europe and in other liberal democracy countries have a pressure of internal economic situation, where some of the countries are experiencing inflation at the rates they've never seen before. So why shouldn't Putin use it as he usually does? So he's trying to turn around the debate, and we can see that very clearly in quite many countries, and sort of pushing the political leaders that are dependable on polls and actual elections, which Putin is not, to rethink maybe there is some easy solution, or easier solution for that matter, out of this situation. But I would bet there is no. So I think what we should be ready to go on with is support, military support to Ukraine, factual pressure on Putin's regime by sanctions, and absolutely not giving up to anything that would humiliate Ukraine after more than 100 days of heroic defense of European values or liberal democracy values.
Yeah. Your points are very well taken. I think many of us believe that the place to defeat Putin now is on the battlefield in Ukraine, because of course there's a danger that he will turn his attention, if he succeeds in Ukraine, to neighboring countries not under the NATO umbrella. And then even, as Ambassador Dobriansky mentioned, he's already threatened your country and other NATO countries, and that's a very real consideration. I would like to ask you about that. How much of a threat do you perceive from Putin and his regime towards Lithuania and its sovereign territory? How much do you worry about Russia using Kaliningrad in order to violate your sovereignty, either through cyber or actual conventional or unconventional means, physical means?
Well, we've always considered Russia being a threat, or for recent 20 years, approximately. So this is nothing new. What is new is that Russia is a country that keeps on proving that we were right. And this is the sad part of the story, because when people sometimes say, look, you were right, and we should have been listening to you, well, I feel no happiness about it, because it's the situation where you most of all would be willing to be proven wrong. You know, this is nothing to be satisfied about. But we've considered Russia as threat for quite a long time already. Of course, after Crimea, that changed internal calculations a lot as well, because it was not just that we belonged to NATO, but there was a very clear sense of understanding and urgency to strengthen our own defense by investing into security and defense to the extent, of course, that our country is able. But from that time, we are at the threshold of NATO and above, 2% of GDP to defense and security. So this is sort of our take on this. But of course, we understand that our security very much depends on our partners. And there was an enhanced forward presence that was established, as a matter of fact, after Crimea, contrary to what Putin is saying, that it was NATO that was creeping towards his border. No, he was moving towards NATO. So NATO, of course, took this step to respond. But after this invasion, and even in the period of build-up of the military troops on the Belarusian territory before this invasion, we were constantly alerting towards our NATO partners that there is a very real need of a different strategy towards how we deny Putin the idea to try and attack whatever eastern flank country. And what is important that after invasion in Ukraine, we've also seen what you actually get when you deoccupy the territory. Those atrocities that were found in Bucha, in Borodyanka, in Irpin, in other territories, we see that what's left then, it's corpses of raped women and dead cyclists who were shot by Russian military or guerrilla people. So this is the previous sort of concept of the defense of Baltic countries looks to be obsolete, and I think everybody understands that. And so now in a NATO format, there is a discussion that will mature in Madrid by the end of June, of how we change this approach towards defense by denial and denial by defense, and the very clear signal that NATO is absolutely serious about its members. We all know that the Kaliningrad, this Suwalki gap, which is between Belarus and Kaliningrad, is a very, very short piece of land. So it is crucial for defense and accessibility of Baltic countries. And I think there is a good understanding among our partners about this. And also the membership of Finland and Sweden that was mentioned by Ambassador Dobriansky, I think for us is a game changer, because we will see a different security situation around the Baltic Sea. And this is very important.
Thank you, Madam Prime Minister. Now I want to ask you something that draws upon your knowledge and understanding of Russia as a Lithuanian, as a citizen of a country that has lived with and next to and understands Russia, the Russian government, the Russian culture, politically and otherwise. Can you talk to us a little bit about your thoughts about the future for any kind of liberal democracy in Russia and the future of Vladimir Putin's government?
Very tricky question, I'll be frank, because I know that we often very much want, and I wanted personally as a person, that Russian people would get a decent government with decent reforms and decent welfare at some point. Because when people do say, aren't you interested in good relations with Russia? Yes, definitely. It is a huge market. It is a huge country. So if there were the same set of values, then there would be a big potential for partnership, not only for my countries, but for my country, but also for all the countries in the region and around the globe. But unfortunately, it is not this way. And when people do say that it is what we need is just, you know, somehow to make liberal democracy values sort of visible in Russia. Well, after 20 years of propaganda and brainwash that the country has been experiencing, it will be a very difficult task. Because what is one of the biggest problems and one of the biggest mistakes that were made in the past is that when Russia regained its independence in 1990, they were starting to find out more about their history, about Stalinism, about gulags, about all those atrocities that were committed by Communist Party, Holodomor and others. And then it stopped, because then it was a huge economic turmoil. People were thinking about how to make ends meet, how to sort of navigate in this new economy that is different from what was there a couple of years ago. And there was no time for this reconciliation with the past. That is, I think, crucial, because this is the poison on which Putin is now building this grandeur, if I may use this word, of Russia against the rest of the world. Because what is actually a crime and what was actually an atrocities and genocide is turned into some sort of heroic achievements. And the fact that the history of the Second World War is not widely known in Russia, and it is sort of, there is this one side of the story now in complete denial of Lend-Lease and participation of the partners, which is pathetic. I think it is a very dangerous state of mind. So it will not be enough, you know, to let Navalny out of prison and all other political opponents out of prison. I think the level of intoxication of people's mind is very dangerous. So basically, what I'm saying, we need another 15 years of different propaganda, or this white propaganda, or simply telling truth to people, whatever unpleasant that might look to Russian people, to at least clean the focus and horizon for their understanding. It will not be easy.
Madam Prime Minister, to follow up on that, is there anything that we can do now to help bring the truth to the Russian people, or is it at this moment in time hopeless?
Well, we are doing what we can. Everybody is doing what we can. We are supporting free media. We are supporting political opponents. Quite many of them live here in the region because they want to be close to Russia, as a matter of fact, so that be in a position to extend their influence more than they could if they were somewhere on the other side of the globe. But it will be a very long story, because I think that for Putin, that was the whole idea. He completely failed in building a prosperity, economy, reforms, infrastructure of the country. So he smartly thought of what he can give instead to the population, and he gave this greatness concept that so many people found so attractive to their hearts and minds. And it will take a very long time, unless there will be a complete economic collapse. But this will not necessarily lead to sort of phoenix from the ashes, because it might be much more dire, as we know from Russian history in the 20th century.
Okay, so no Hollywood ending in sight. I think we've reached the point now where I would like to turn to the huge amount of questions that we have from our very engaged audience. I think it's only fair to you for me to make sure that I ask you something that pertains to your security and the upcoming NATO summit. I would be interested in hearing what you would like to come out of the summit in terms of additional security for your country. Are you looking for permanent placement of bases in your country and in the other Baltic states?
Well, first and foremost, this is, of course, the enhanced presence with prepositioning. And then what is important, what we also see from the way Russia fights against Ukraine, it's air defense and coastal defense, because neither Lithuania nor Latvia nor Estonia are countries that have a significant strategic depth. So we need to think smartly about the counter-fighting whatever attack, and for that matter, the air defense is crucial. So I think this is developing in a good direction. Of course, we all have challenges, given that quite many countries were also living in this understanding that there is no significant need in investing into defense and security, because the times of war are over, and now we need to focus on infrastructure and welfare and innovations and public services. And this appeared not to be the case. So for NATO countries, this is also a challenging moment when you actually need to rethink it. And for Germany, that was a challenging moment to announce in the end of February a complete turnover from what was the belief of the establishment for so many years, and a very clear signal of increased attention for security and defense. And I think for us, this is a very good sign and a very important step. But this will also take time until we replenish our stock and train enough personnel and strengthen the capacities on the ground where they are most needed, to the extent that is needed.
Well, thank you for that. I have another NATO question from, and I don't know if I'm supposed to mention the names of the people with their questions, but since I haven't so far, I guess I won't now. But Another excellent question about Sweden and Finland. So what do you anticipate will happen with regard to their membership? Will the rest of the NATO be able to overcome Turkey's objections?
Well, it's unfortunate that in a situation like that, we have some of our partners trying to sort of do some cherry picking around the questions of strategic and deal breaking, so to say, or groundbreaking decisions. But I hope that there will be a solution found, as it usually is in formats like that, as it is in European Union and NATO. Because it is of a strategic interest, I think, for NATO itself to have Finland and Sweden also in the club, and all the efforts will be concentrated towards achieving this goal. Especially since the countries express this will, and the societies, the population, both in Finland and Sweden, are very supportive towards that decision. So for us, I mean, we are cooperating with with Sweden, with Finland, also in safety and security areas. But those countries being members of NATO, of course, would be a quantitative difference from what we feel now.
Yeah, it would be a military and political bonus for sure. We have a question also about Belarus in the chat, and the questioner talks about Lukashenko moving closer to Russia with some reluctance. We know there's a long history of Lukashenko trying to have it both ways, kind of akin to Yanukovych back in the days when he was the president of Ukraine. Now we have a situation where, of course, Putin has relied on Belarus to some extent, but the question here asks whether you consider Belarus, because of some of its lack of support for the invasion of Ukraine, a potential Achilles heel for Russia, and somewhere a country that could give Putin problems.
Well, I would not be too optimistic about Belarus not giving a proper hand to Putin in this invasion, because let's remember how it all started. It started from Belarusian soil. And Belarusian soil was used for this invasion for a very long time. So the fact that Lukashenko's troops are not participating physically and are not fighting on Ukraine territory, I think is not sort of cleaning Lukashenko from him being an accomplice to Putin, equally liable for all those crimes that were committed in Ukraine against civilian population and infrastructure. So I think he put himself, of course, in a very complicated situation after 2020, when he denied that there is no support in the white population, and decided to stay in power wherever it takes. So now his options are quite limited, because he's not able to flirt with European Union anymore like he used to do in his past, and of course he's very much dependent on Russia as a strategic investor, so to say. But I would claim that in this episode we can say that Belarus de facto became a military territory for Russian army. And this is also changing the geopolitical situation, security situation for Baltic countries or Poland or other countries of eastern flank. But on the positive note, what is very clear is that this war is extremely unpopular among Belarusian society, even regardless that they are not pouring into the streets anymore, because they are frightened to death by all the crimes that Lukashenko's regime has committed against his own people. But and regardless the propaganda that they also have on their TV and other media channels, it is extremely unpopular. And that is why Lukashenko has to sort of navigate not between West and Kremlin, but rather between his own people and Kremlin.
Yeah. Now, there's another area, one of the questions, comments upon, which is the ports. So it's a kind of two-pronged question. How can NATO help better protect the Baltic ports? And then how can, I think the questioner probably meant NATO, but I'm going to add NATO and or the international community break Putin's blockade of the Black Sea ports?
I think these are different issues. On the grain blockage that has the sort of most rational route through Odessa and Black Sea towards the markets where they were usually sold and consumed. I think what is needed, I mean, Ukrainians cannot just open the ports because they will open Odessa, that is so much under radar of Putin that he dreams on sort of grabbing. So what I think is needed, there is a need of coalition of the willing. NATO is somewhat a different story, but I think the coalition of the willing countries that would provide the necessary weapons to secure the ports and also secure the route of the ships that would transfer the grain. We are explaining this idea for I think a second month in a row already to our partners and friends, and I think this is a doable thing. In case of our defense or our security, well, this is, you know, a holistic approach, because when you consider a country being a permanent threat, unfortunately, then you need to have all the elements of the defense in place. And this is for military people to find the best solutions and the best locations of a particular weapons and particular sorts of troops and defense forces. But I think what is important that we keep in mind the lessons that we are able to learn from this Russia's invasion into Ukraine, because there are quite a couple of lessons about what is left after Russian invasion. Lesson number one, and then the second lesson is that actually it is so easy to sit in your own territory or in the territory of Belarus and bomb civil infrastructure and cities and hospitals and whatever you are not supposed to bomb under the rules of war. And this calls for a significant attention on air defense.
Well, I think we would all agree with you, the audience that has tuned in, that we need to do more to help Ukraine prevail in this horrendous war. The world was shocked by what they saw in the aftermath of the Russian pushing the Ukrainians pushing the Russians back out of places like Bucha. You are absolutely correct. There must be accountability, and we have to stop the Russians from continuing to get away with this kind of slaughter. Tactics that they have used, of course, in Syria before. I constantly like to remind audiences of that, because the Syrians also deserve accountability. This is a global challenge that Russia has unleashed upon the international community. And so we are really honored to have somebody with us today, Madam Prime Minister, of your standing and your courage. You provide an example to leaders all around the world. We are grateful that you have given of your time and your wisdom to the Atlantic Council and to our viewing audience. And we wish you much good luck and success in continuing to further strengthen your country economically, politically, militarily, and doing so as well for the global community. So thank you, Madam Prime Minister, and good luck.
Thanks a lot for having me on this occasion, and I think it is important to share experience, although sometimes the painful experience is a very important sign and very important source of strength and insight, so to say, unfortunately. And I wish all the best to the audience and to you, and thanks a lot for having me here.
Thank you.